You know, guys, and I truly do hope I'm not the only one who's noticed this, but there is a bit of a painful redundancy to almost every conversation I have seen so far that discusses the most popular female idols and girl groups, and KATSEYE in specific, unfortunately does not escape the monotony any more than any of the others.
Over the last few months, the way that they have taken a turn into being incredibly over-sexualized, not just their songs and the lyrics and the music videos, but their performances, is so sad as a mother.
Because the second one implies that these women are being objectified or exploited in a way that strips them of agency, and you haven't actually demonstrated that. You're just showing us women posing provocatively and assuming that because you perceive the imagery sexually, the women must, therefore be victims of sexualization. Like, those aren't the same thing. Yeah.
I have no interest in overextending myself through moralizing, but yeah, I just want to bring a different perspective to this conversation because I feel we have been over-exercising the same arguments.
I don't know which is worse, being called Baljit or listening to KATSEYE's latest song, Hootie Fruity. Because who the fuck is writing these songs? First it was about eating zucchini, then it was Pinky Up, then now it's a song about Hootie Fruity. What is this song even about? My coochie? After listening to this song, I feel like I need to go on a hiatus to recover from it.
So KATSEYE has released a brand new EP called Wild. I'm going to be reading the lyrics to one of their newest songs, Hootie Fruity, off that EP. I am just here to read the lyrics. I am not giving my opinion on the song. I am just here to read the lyrics, okay? Hootie Fruity. Hootie fruit, 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 fruit. Hootie fruit, 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 fruit. Hootie fruit, 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 fruit. Hootie fruit.
The first thing I want to address is the obvious, which is, yes, they are hypersexualized. These girls are commercialized, obviously. Another thing I hear is they're too young. Well, again, that's not new. They always are. The choreography is inappropriate. The industry is exploitative. Again, yes, no one is disputing that. But I can't help but feel that we are congratulating ourselves over something that has never really prioritized itself in subtlety.
Am I getting old? I mean, I have a 4-year-old daughter who likes KATSEYE, likes listening to KATSEYE. I've never shown her any of the videos just by chance, but I'm definitely not showing her this one. And I have a 13-year-old niece who loves them, who's desperate to see them in concert. Listen, I'm all for the empowerment of women and women's bodies. I myself made it through multiple rounds for the Pussycat Dolls reality show back in the day. And I'm not a stranger to singing and shaking what my mama gave me, but I don't know, am I just getting old? Am I getting old?
Every generation looks back, at the aesthetic current of the generation beneath it and thinks, sure, good Lord, what is happening to us? Our parents had their equivalents, their parents had theirs. Like I keep saying, guys, there is nothing new under the sun. We appreciate that the distribution mechanism migrates from television to TikTok to YouTube to, I don't know, whatever the new thing will be, but the nature, right, of the human transaction does retain its predictability. So if you're not familiar, at all with the cultural object that we are discussing today, which I absolutely would not blame you for, especially so if you are literally, if you are over the age of 15, no harm done, please, no harm done. But we are talking about KATSEYE. They emerged from the Hype Gethin Dream Academy project, and essentially they were deliberately made, although I think a better word would be engineered, as a global girl group whose members retain distinct national, aesthetic, and personal identities whilst becoming legible as a singular collective entity. The group further explains that the origin behind its name, KATSEYE, actually comes from the cat's eye gemstone, which, if you look it up, has a characteristic optical phenomenon that changes as the stone is moved and is viewed from different directions. The official group account explicitly describes the stone as radiating, these different vibrant colors depending on the way, like I said, you turn it, you view it, you move it. So that description obviously becomes a metaphor for the, the diversity of the group in maintaining individuality through their talents, but also through their ethnicities, their aesthetics, everything. You you get the point. The phenomenon is called chatoyancy. It has its roots in a French word, to glitter or to shine like a cat's eye. I find that particularly interesting. I find that honestly, I find it honestly to be of quite intriguing concern, especially when you really put a critical eye on KATSEYE's influence on a multicultural level. There is a metaphorical legibility to this because the cat's eye does not merely possess an appearance, it possesses an appearance constituted by being looked at from a particular angle. And so we have a bit, I think, of a of a chilling symbolism here if you think about it a little bit more deeply, because what if we are educating our girls in contemporary femininity as a chatoyant, not as an object, not as something to I guess superficially be desired, but an entity, right? An image, an idol whose identity is persistently calibrated according to the gaze under which it is displayed. The girl learns to be most valuable when she is visually legible as an in-demand image. You see what I'm saying? And it's always an image that is perpetuated within a very specific format of exposure.
Yet again, this brings us back to the parents' responsibility, because if we're specifically talking about minors doing sexualized dances and posting them online, then the appropriate conversation is about minors' behavior and the adults and platforms responsible for safeguarding them. Not pretending that adult women are morally responsible for every way a teenager might interpret or imitate pop culture, or how their parents enable it without a second care.
But how do you respond genuinely to an 8, 9, 10-year-old girl who protests you removing her access to a certain cultural object with with an honesty that you can probably relate to? What if she tells you, mom, dad, aunt, big sister, whatever, I like this. I really like this. Not mom, dad, whoever, I fully understand the sexual politics of this, and so I'm making a conscious decision, not I understand the nature of this industry, I know the philosophy, I know perfectly well what I'm doing, what I'm habituating my mind and my body against, right? Just look, I like this. Like, this genuinely, this makes me feel good. And I don't describe this, in a sinister adult sense that I think many would try to project onto an 8-year-old, but I mean this in the very ordinary psychological sense that children can discover that certain imitations against particular images can open up a horizon of self-perception that, you guys, is very difficult to come back from.
It's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and it goes, nobody knows you're out of control.
They like the way it feels, guys, genuinely, to become habituated in a specific, often sexual campaign of choreography, familiarized in what musical texture requires a specific gesture out of you, a specific imitation out of you. I don't need to get into the details, but I know full and well you guys are well aware of what exactly I'm referring to. And what if you stripping that image from them doesn't take the feeling of enjoyment, of genuine ease and indulgence away as any more than it would you, their age, and your parents taking from you your access to the Pussycat Dolls or Fifth Harmony or the Spice Girls or Destiny's Child, or there's so many I could name. My point is, your parents taking away your access did not kill your craving for it. And this is precisely where I think the conversation becomes more morally urgent, more morally serious rather than less. Because if we answer by pretending, there's absolutely nothing psychologically stimulating about a specific cultural object that we ourselves find to be cringe, find to be weird, which, don't get me wrong, it's not weird, but it's just, it's too much, right? It's too much for an 8 to 12-year-old. My point is, we cannot answer pleasure as though pleasure were self-interpreting, because it's not. Human beings are sincerely able to genuinely enjoy what is forming them badly. I mean, we appreciate this intuitively in almost every other domain. Food, for instance, can taste wonderful whilst training the appetite, like I said, badly. Can familiarize us to pleasure whilst distorting our expectations of intimacy. So So why do we suddenly like become illiterate when the subject is aesthetics? It's about discovering, as I think many of you are familiar with. I mean, I am certainly familiar with, that a particular kind of self-representation produces a certain kind of emotional reward, not just in doing it yourself, but in witnessing it, because obviously this is the machinery through which, you know, things on TikTok go viral. Social media in general, I think, just reinforces the cycle, because obviously the child can imitate the image, upload it, receive metrics for it, watch other people watch her, and thereby obviously discover that there are measurable returns for this. Anyway, where I actually want to take this conversation is away from the exhausted question of whether or not our children, in specific our girls, are being corrupted. Because honestly, you guys, like, full disclaimer, okay, this is fully my opinion, okay? I personally think that there's something intellectually and morally impoverished about pathologizing the child for failing to possess the critical apparatus of an adult. The child does not stand outside culture with, I don't know, like a clipboard conducting an objective moral audit of what and why they find certain things stimulating. They absorb what kinds of selves, you know, seem to be socially rewarded before they mature, right? Before they develop the conceptual distance necessary to interrogate whether or not those rewards are worth wanting. Therefore, I think that to condemn a child for liking something that she cannot yet anatomize is to conflate the subject of formation with the agent of formation. The 8-year-old, for instance, the 9-year-old, does not need to understand sexuality. He does not need to have like an exhaustive appreciation for the way women's bodies are appreciated or not appreciated in culture in order to get it into them that certain bodies are distinctly appreciated, not just for the fact that they are exposed, but for how they are exposed. A girl does not need to understand, you know, the nature of commodification, of objectification, in order to appreciate the convertibility quotient of attention to visibility, you know, certainty of significance, etc. And she certainly does not need to understand the metaphysics of personhood for that generation's culture to answer that question on her behalf. What kind of person should you become if you want to be appreciated in a particular way? I'm not even just talking sexual. I'm talking any image that propagates into the culture that is imitable. It could be hyper-femininity, it could be thinness, it could be ironic detachment, it could be submissiveness, it could be dominance. Really, you guys, it could be anything. Even the increasingly strange aesthetic of being made aggressively sexually visible, right? But simultaneously being fashioned into some sort of fragility, right? That submissiveness, that maybe not submissiveness, but that helplessness, that I can't do anything for myself, likeness, that infantilization, i.e. Ariana Grande. Okay, why would a woman get to a stage in her adulthood where she wants to be infantilized? Because that's an itch, right? Clearly, that the industry has long identified as latent. But again, why? We need to ask ourselves, why? Desires are not born fully articulated. They are educated through repetition, through imitation, through reward. The infantilized aesthetic in particular may offer a very peculiar but very, I think, enviable psychological bargain. Maximum visibility with diminished responsibility. To be intensely perceived, right? Without having to carry the full symbolic burden of adulthood. Now, does that mean that every woman who enjoys, being cute, being, I guess, embodying that baby-like image, covertly enjoys or craves being infantilized? No, obviously not. But it does mean the consistent recurrence of that particular psychological arrangement is strange enough to ask what particular human ache it is responding to. Perhaps it offers a fantasy of influence and, I don't know, maybe not overtly imposing power, but at the very least, that influence, and I'm thinking of Ariana Grande, that access to a group of people who will indiscriminately protect your image without the terrifying burden of sovereignty, right? Without the burden of being responsible for the way you are affecting young people's psychologies. And I think in that way, it makes adulthood feel negotiable.
And if the girl group KATSEYE truly wants to win this war, all they have to do is sneak into Epic Records, log into the mainframe, type in Fifth Harmony into the search bar, and download every piece of unreleased music from that girl group. Change a few lines, change a few words, switch the wigs around, re-record it, and let's start releasing those. Because we all know, despite Fifth Harmony having their issues, one thing that was never a critique was that music. Even the weakest track is better than the best of a lot of these tracks being released today in 2026. Look, we have to come up with something because we're running out of time. In fact, I don't know how much time I even have left to even, talk about this. It's that serious. But there's a little gay boy out there who deserves to have a girl group that he can blast in his headphones at 8 a.m. in the morning as he speed walks down the hallway. Gen Z had Fifth Harmony and Little Mix. The gays before had the Pussycat Dolls. The ones before had Destiny's Child. Like, this is part of the prophecy. Lives are at stake here. I'm just a little bit confused how you have 6 talented, stunning girls, four as of now, left standing. Talented, stunning girls, and we have nothing, we don't know what to do with them. What's going on? What's going on?
And yes, every generation finds its predecessor's version of the ideal image, right, to be somewhat embarrassing, okay, somewhat cringe. But embarrassment is not analysis. You can certainly hide behind it because obviously there's everything to be discussed in distaste. But the subject of concern, right, the 8-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old girl, I can't help but feel that most of them will remain completely unsympathetic to appreciating our incompatibility with her preferences, with the culture's preferences of the time. And the reason I say that is because I don't know, okay, I don't know if you guys have met a person who has had a particular idol, say from the 90s or from the 80s, a sexualized idol, right? And now they're in their 40s, they're in their 50s, but they are still die-hard fans. And still, you can't get through to them how problematic that image is, because it was introduced to them at that vulnerable age, so it's difficult to to carve out. I think once they've already become so emotionally familiar and entangled with the image, it's very difficult to convince them against their first ideal. I also think this is why the peripheral controversies surrounding KATSEYE are so seductive as objects of criticism, because guys, we can talk about how ridiculous the lyrics are for days. We can talk about the choreography, we can talk about the appropriation.
You guys, I think I finally figured out why KATSEYE has that really weird accent in Hootie Fruity. It's that HYBE is doing with Brazilians what K-pop historically has always done with black people in their misuse of ebonics. And I know some people are gonna be like, oh, but their accent isn't accurate to Brazilians at all. And HYBE is doing to Brazilians what K-pop has historically always done with black people in their misuse of ebonics. This is the same thing, but now it's just the cool factor is being switched to a different country or like a different group of people. Brazilians are like a lot of like Brazilian culture, like the creators of Brazilian culture are in fact black people.
The product placement, the Brazilian references, whether a particular gesture is too inappropriate for an 8-year-old, whether the attending generation has inevitably descended into degeneracy. We can talk about all of that, and it'll be another internet trial, and everyone will retreat into their respective corners. But those are all visible fragments of a much more much more subterranean formation that has matured in more of us than we care to admit. I think of what Kierkegaard said, understanding that the self is constituted in relation to what it repeatedly rests against. And so the true solution to the KATSEYE chokehold cannot productively, right, be contemplated without introducing a competing template. Saying things like, do not enjoy this. How could you find like anything stimulating in this? I think does nothing but isolate, I think, and ridicule and over moralize. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing I find to be of substance, of any redeemable substance with KATSEYE's music. But what I'm saying is that kind of prohibition without a rival conception of beauty, of desirability, of what it means to, what it means to be an in-demand image leaves a child's imagination vacant. And obviously we know that a vacant imagination is eventually colonized by whatever image is available. to the child, right, the teenager, but honestly, girls in general, I think I definitely needed it at that age. I think we as women need to be made familiar with what it means to be fascinating, right, and feminine without being sexually ornamental. And the alternative to the idol is not ugliness. I think it is a different account of glory. And I think until we can conceptualize that, we'll be having the same conversation, and it will be a concern that is recursed against every 15 years. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you stayed until the end. But otherwise, I'm so grateful for your view. I'm so grateful for your patience. And to those of you who are new, I'm so happy to have you here. So yeah, you guys, please take care of yourselves. Yeah, you take care, and goodbye.